Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? No. No? All right. So this is the official start, yeah? Here we go. That's better, right? So my name is Arun Hariharan Sivasubramanian. Don't worry, you don't have to call me all of that. Just call me Arun. I'm a software developer at carsales.com.au. And actually, I found the first bug right now in testing.stockholm.au website. It still mentions I'm a QA engineer, but it's fine because I put the bug in there. I didn't let Cameron know that you have to change it, so I'm not going to say that. So for those of you who don't know what car sales is, we do not sell cars. We are Australia's #1 online classifieds. We have cars, bikes, boats, caravan campings, and we sell all of those in domestic, and we also have presence internationally. Now, would I be wrong in assuming that every single person in this room has at some point tested something manually? Manual testing. Everyone, yeah? Of course. Manual testing is a really crucial part of testing. Now, how many of you have actually done some sort of automation? Can be API, UI, any sort of automation. Actually, I should ask the other way. Who has not done automation before? That's good. So almost every single person has some sort of automation experience. So today, the topic that we're going to talk about is Puppeteer. Anyone heard about Puppeteer?
We can't hear you properly.
Can you hear me now?
Have you heard about Puppeteer? Yes.
I think I didn't turn this on. Can you hear me now? Thank you for letting me know the first 5 minutes, yeah? Not in the questions section. All right. So how many of you have actually worked with Puppeteer before? That's great. So those guys are the ones you should ask questions at the end of the talk, yeah? Not me. All right. So there's a really interesting story behind this particular title. I think I have a superpower that I don't even realize that I have. I'm able to predict the future without my knowledge. So I gave this title to Cameron 7-8 months ago, that UI automation is easy, famous last words of a QA engineer. And when I gave this title, that was me, right? I was a QA, very happy, sane. I still had a black hair. And then exactly a month after I gave this talk, I transitioned into a developer, right? And that actually became my last words. And that was me a few days ago. I don't know if I'm sane. I don't know what happened to my hair. But I'm not here to talk about my transition from having a black hair to a bleached hair, but rather I'm here to talk about something more interesting, right? So before we dive into the actual talk, I want to take you through the agenda for today and the key takeaways, yeah? So today's agenda is going to be very simple. I'm going to briefly mention about CarSales transition from having a monolith to microservices, how it affected us from moving from C# Selenium to JavaScript, and then we'll talk about Puppeteer. What is Puppeteer? Why we use it at CarSales? And then we'll go through code. It's going to be very simple code, and then a demo. Hopefully the demo works. It worked so far. And then finally, we'll finish off with conclusions. So the key takeaway would be is that you get started with Puppeteer straight away. Though I would advise you to wait until all of the talks are over. I know you're very enthusiastic. Right. Shall we get started?
Yes.
All right. So the CarSales journey from monolith to microservices started almost around 8 to 9 years ago, right? A brief introduction about monolith we had at CarSales. It was a single code base with 4 GB in size. It would take hours to build and deploy, and it would take weeks to months to actually test a particular feature before it goes out. Obviously, it was not the ideal situation. We wanted to move away from that, and we wanted to break that into smaller chunks, into microservices. So around 2010, 2011, we started breaking those services, monoliths to microservices. And 5 years ago, once we started moving more towards microservices, we started adopting cloud infrastructure, moving away from in-house service. What we still use at CarSales is just more of AWS. I think every single service is now cloud. We don't have anything in-house at the moment. And then 3 years ago, we started adopting Docker containers, and then started using more and more CI/CD pipeline. I'm not going to talk a lot about CI/CD pipeline because there is a great talk coming up today by Ben Cooney. He's here. Hi. He's not here. Hi. Anyway, he's going to talk about CI/CD pipelines in details today. But then the most important thing happened. I joined car sales 3 years ago. Why this is important is because when I joined car sales, we still had the test suites written in C# and Selenium. How many of you have worked with C# or just Selenium in general? Almost everyone, a lot of people, right? So what language do you usually use? Java? Anyone Java? C#? Ruby? Wow, just one. Great. When I started car sales, my first language was Ruby. We used something called Calabash. Python? Any other language that I missed out? JavaScript? Who loves JavaScript here? Like, honestly loves JavaScript. We'll come to that later, yeah? So we still had our test suites in C# and Selenium, and imagine, these test suites have been there for more than 9 years. When we started with monolith services, these test suites been there. The more features we added, the more tests were there. It's amazing. It had great support. It was a mature platform. We had a lot of test coverage and everything, right? But then, as I mentioned earlier, why did we want to move away from C# to something else like JavaScript? Because we started adopting more and more microservices. We wanted to have our tests running in CI/CD pipeline, right? So the one thing with Selenium and C# that we used was that we had to package the Chrome driver along with the tests in itself, and the Chrome driver would take around 100 to 150 megabytes in size. So every time we run a test in CI/CD, it would need to pull the code from the repository, then run the tests, and the time it took for us to actually start the test and finish the test was just not acceptable at all, right? And then the second thing is 9 years of code. You should just imagine how many layers we started adding on top of it, proxies and more libraries. It was just not stable enough. You run the test 10 times, you need to pass 10 times. If it is just 5 or 6 times, it's just not really good for us, especially in a CI/CD. And then finally, slow to finish. It would take a few minutes to actually run all the tests. We're not running all the tests. What we would do is we'd just separate the critical tests just for the CI/CD. Once they pass and they deploy to production, we run another big suite of tests. It would take a lot of time for us. It was just not really good for us. So we made the decision to move away from C#. We had two options actually. Either rewrite all of our tests in C# again, or start something from scratch. You know what we did, right? Moved away from C# to JavaScript. Trust me, I was the most excited person in the whole floor for the first 2 days. Because I had absolutely no idea what JavaScript was. I've never experienced it. And we decided we're going to go to JavaScript, and I said, yes, this is the thing. I'm going to learn it so much, and I'm going to be so happy for the first 2 days. After the second day, I needed therapy. But jokes aside, the reason we went to JavaScript was because a few reasons. The community was moving towards JavaScript during that time. It was lightweight, and the most important thing for us was we as a QA could write the tests and then give it to the developers so that they can maintain it. It's not just one person or one team that maintains the test. So it had a lot of advantage. So we chose JavaScript. But again, the next problem. How many different types of JavaScript frameworks are there? 1 million? Anyone want to take? 10 million? Infinite? Like, you don't know, right? So where do you get started? So what we did was we split into a small group of teams, and then we tried out a few different frameworks that were good for our requirements, and then we finally chose something called WebDriver.io, which is still based on the WebDriver API like C# and Selenium. It was really good for us. A couple of teams started adopting it, but as we started adopting it, during that time, we started introducing a new feature into car sales website, tracking. What is tracking? It's not something like Facebook or Google or something that does to you, you know? It's less scary. Has anyone heard about tracking before? Google Analytics, GA tracking? Yep. Has anyone worked with GA tracking? Yep. Just a few people. Yeah, I can talk whatever I want then. Actually, I'm going to show you what it is and how it looks like. Okay. Let's hope it works. So I've got my Chrome open, and I'm getting my DevTools open here. And I have this little plugin called Observe Point. It lets you to just track all of the tracking that's happening in the website, right? I'm going to go into, I can't type today, carsales.com.au. Just loads of fine. If you go here, that is all of the tracking that we have at Car Sales. But what we want to know today is Google, which is maybe this, not this. This one. Can you see anything? Is it clear at the back? Zoom. I'm trying, I don't know how to zoom this. Okay, it's getting there. So basically, Google Analytics tracking has two types. One is a page view, and the other is a hit type event. All it does is to measure how many people have viewed a particular page, how many people have clicked on a particular element, so that it gives you more data to track and then give more useful features back to the audience, right? So we started implementing it in just car sales initially, and then we started moving to bike sales, boat sales, and all of our websites. And the challenge was that how do you know if it is properly implemented? We need some sort of testing to happen, and that's when we started using WebDriver IO to simulate UI automation for this, and we hit our first snag. First snag, WebDriver is cross-browser. It cannot natively intercept network requests from a browser. So what we did was, as a temporary solution, we started adding a proxy layer on top of it, and then we realized what we're doing is exactly what we did with C#. We're starting to add more and more layers. Over time, it gets flakier. We didn't want that. So what other options did we have? Well, it's just a bigger picture of what you want to see. Puppeteer. So Puppeteer is backed by Google, which is a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. How many of you know how many products Google has killed? Who knows? Actually, I forgot my clicker. So it is a JavaScript-based high-level API that runs in the browser. So it does not need an external driver to run. It runs within the browser, and it is developed by the Chrome DevTools team, which means you have absolute access to all of the tools that are present in Chrome. Like performance analysis, if you want to do a performance analysis, you could do it. And it has tight integrations with Chromium. Actually, if you try to install Puppeteer right now in your system, all it does is it also downloads the latest version of Chromium along with it. So it runs with Chromium and also Chrome at some point. And then when we decided, it was just had 1 million downloads in NPM, 50,000 plus stars, but all of these would not matter if it didn't actually work for us, right? I'm going to show you if it works for us, but before that, who's interested in seeing the actual code behind this test? Everyone, that's great. But before we start looking at the code, there are a few requisites. We need to have Node.js as a runtime, npm or yarn for the package manager. Jest is our test framework. Anyone work with Jest? Yeah. And then, obviously, Puppeteer. Right. Before we jump into the structure, code, there are 3 things that I want you to know. First is the package manager. It is exactly like package manager in any other language or framework that you use. Here we have package.json. This is where you define all of your libraries and dependencies, what you want to install. The second is the hooks, set up and tear down. Here we have before each and after each. Whatever you want to run before each test, you write there, and after the test, if you want to kill the browser, if you want to clear the cache, change some values, put it in after each, and finally, the test definition. It's very simple. Test, give it a name, and then start writing your test. Clear? I'm going to ask this question at the end of the talk, right? Actually, I should ask someone pronounce my full name on the first go. That'll be harder, I guess. Okay. That's great. Actually, how many of you find this funny? Setup has detected, setup is currently running. Just That's just code, Visual Studio Code, not me. All right. We have a GitHub link where you can actually download the code and get started, but I'll show that after the end of the talk. For now, let's actually jump into the demo. Can you see at the last? Is it clear, or do you want me to zoom in a bit more? Clear? Right. As we said, this is the package.json file, and we have the dependencies here. We have jest Puppeteer. So basically, you put all your dependencies here and your scripts, and then when you do npm install, it installs all of your libraries for this particular project. It's very simple. Usually what you would have in a bigger project is that you would have a separate configuration files, app settings files for production, development, staging. We don't want all of that configuration here. It's just very simple getting started. So once we say all of our dependencies, we'll jump straight onto the tests folder. We have just a demo test here. The first 5 files are really simple. It's just import files. You're importing some of the libraries for this particular test. And this one, before each. All we are telling here is that we're launching Puppeteer with the browser. You see an option called headless. So the good thing about Puppeteer is that it comes headless as a false, as a true, as a default. So you can run headless browser testing if you want. And we're just setting up the size of the browser and all of those things. Again, normally you do it in a configuration file, not here. Since this is just a single test, I've put it here. And then what we're calling is await browser.new page. So it creates a new browser, and then after each, we're just going to close the browser. That's all. And the actual test here is we're going to check for page load and click. A page load, again, is when you open a page, Google Analytics gets triggered and then has some details like what page it is, along with some custom values that you want to put. You know, if you want to track a particular user, give them a user ID and stuff, all of that. And then a click is, okay, I clicked on the search button, I clicked on this particular car or vehicle. So all of those stuff, that's page load and click event, right? So that's what we're going to write. And the most important thing that why we started with Puppeteer is just this single line. Puppeteer has this ability to intercept all of your network requests throughout the whole test. So all you have to do is just say that once you open page, I want all the requests to be recorded. So once you record all of your requests, you can then leisurely go back and then parse your requests and then do some validations against it. That's literally what I'm saying. So I start recording, and then I go to this particular website, then click on this particular button. After that's all done, this line just basically takes in all the URLs that has been captured, and basically it's an if-else statement with I want anything that starts with this particular URL needs to be filtered, and see if it has a home page and all of these values in there. If all of these values are there, awesome. Otherwise, could not find the expected URL. It's very simple, right? Clear? Do you want to see if it actually works? Let's do it. So I've already gotten into the command prompt. I'm going to write pm run test. There we go. It seems to work. It's not a really interesting video, but it has done what we actually wanted to do. Just as a fun thing, I wanted to see if actually Testing Talks website has integrated GA tracking in it. Do you want to see that? Actually, let's go. Testing Talks. Here. There we go. That's the first thing. Great. Now you're all an expert in testing tracking, yeah? So we ran the demo, it's fine. And just in case if the demo didn't run, I had a screenshot saved for you to show that it actually worked. Fine. So that's one of the use cases we have at car sales for Puppeteer, is that we need to intercept the network and do stuff like that. But there are also other use cases within car sales that we use Puppeteer for. We have some homegrown Chrome extensions that we want to test. That Puppeteer is really great at testing Chrome extensions. And then at some point, what we had was we are moving from one tech stack to another tech stack for a website. And the WebDriver, what we used was just not stable enough, but Puppeteer was just rock solid when we were testing, because it had a few issues like late loading of elements or sometimes double reload of pages. Puppeteer was just a champ in that. Again, network performance analysis is just great. So if you open, so for example, I'll just show you what it is. It's easy to show rather than talk. Actually, I don't know where it is, so let's not talk. We'll just talk about it. But if you open DevTools, you'll be able to see the number of requests, and then you'll be able to see the timestamp in which each request was issued and the number of time it took for each request to complete. You could do performance testing on top of that. That's really great for Chrome. Again, I'm pretty sure you have use cases where you'll have to alter the responses of a request. You know, what if this returns 500? What if this returns 404? All of that you can still do with Puppeteer and then Chrome extensions. But this is all good. Drawbacks. It's very tightly integrated with Chromium. But if you want to test it on Chrome, you can still point it out to a local installation of a Chrome. But if you want to do cross-browser testing, I think Selenium is probably a better option. Firefox at the moment are adopting Puppeteer for their version, but I don't know how great it is. It's still in beta stage, right? Video playback is not supported due to Chromium restrictions. Again, if you want to test video playback and stuff like that, you can point it to Chrome. But those are some of the cons. Finally, we've come to the last slide. I think I've ran through too fast, have I? That's 1 minute. That's perfect, actually. I like Puppeteer. So one of the reasons why we wanted to move from C# to JavaScript was that we wanted faster tests. We wanted it to be light. And then Puppeteer has just given exactly that. You know, we went from having minutes in CI/CD pipeline to having coming to seconds, and then it's just very stable. You don't have to use sleep in your test, and that's a great thing, but depending upon how you write and your website. And then finally, it's less flaky. We don't have to add more layers on top of it, and it's got a great documentation support, and it's very easy to get started. It's very lightweight. And because of all of these reasons, I personally like Puppeteer. I'm not forcing you to use Puppeteer, but get started. So future. So are we actually going to use Puppeteer at car sales for everything? As you all know, experts, there is no single tool that satisfies all of the requirements. But for us, the requirements are some teams need to have network access, some teams need to test Chrome extensions, and for those teams, Puppeteer is just excellent. So those teams would still continue using Puppeteer. For other teams who needs cross-browser testing, they're still using WebDriver IO. But I think the more and more we start using it, we'll start adopting more. That's it. Questions? Yes, please be less violent. Well, I think mostly it is used as a part of end-to-end tests. I don't know what we call end-to-end. Is it acceptance test? People call it differently. We don't use it just for acceptance tests. We also use it for integration tests as well. But again, it depends on what team you're talking about, right? So this is network test. We use it in a team called Data Collection Platform. What they are solely interested in just making sure that any team that implements this tracking needs to make sure that that is working properly. So that's exactly that it is used. And for me, in the team that I work, we are predominantly backend API. For us, we use it for integration tests. So it suits. If it suits you, we use it.
Does it mean that you're still making
No, we've completely gotten rid of C# Selenium tests, and all of those test cases have either been migrated to either WebDriver IO or Puppeteer. So for you, the acceptance tests that we had in C# and Selenium, they're probably in WebDriver IO if it suits. Yep.
You might have mentioned it. Is there mobile from support?
That's a really good question. I don't think so. Or at least there is support, but I don't think Puppeteer is the best choice for us because we have a Mobi team and they tried using Puppeteer. It just wasn't really good enough. So they're trying a new tool that I can't remember on top of my head, but I'll let you know just after the talk. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yep, that's a really good question. Yes, and I'll tell you an example. So in one of our tests, what we need to do is we need to click on a button in the UI. Once the request is gone, we get back a response with a particular value, and then we need to take that value and we need to hit an API endpoint to make sure that the value is correct and the details that we sent are correct. And Puppeteer is just really smooth in doing that. I actually had a test to demonstrate that, but we didn't have enough time. But yes, for your question, yes. I'll ask my question now. Right. What are the 3 important things that we saw in the test structure today? Raise your hand. Yeah, sorry.
So you're going to have the before and after, and you can use the help.
Yep. And then anything else? Yeah. So I'll give the prize and split it between 3. Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. And next up is Jet. Enjoy your talks. I'll just be outside during the breaks. If you want to come chat with me, I'm happy. Thank you so much. Cheers.